I have not been in a place that doesn't have some level of snow, except for communities that don't allow overnight parking, which, you know, I went through that, you know, Pine Island did that for a number of years after they got tired of, and they had a lot of battles with people in that town. I still don't know why there were so many, but, and Chief Scholiner was involved in some of that, you know, years ago. But basically, there they got to the point where they said enough of trying to worry about this measuring snow and all this stuff, which I totally get. And they just said, we're not gonna allow between October and the end of March overnight parking on streets. Well, that was a real heavy lift, and it lasted a number of years. I was kind of surprised, but they eventually repealed it and they went back to, I think, another level, like 2 inches or whatever. So I still don't know one way or another here if this will work without a measurement. I don't,
to Dan's point, you know, about could you have this based on, you know, mobilization of city crews? You certainly could. I mean, you could take the third line of the ordinance where it talks about accumulation of snow on any street or highway. After the word highway, add that requires mobilization of any snowplow or city snowplow crews. And at least it gets you that standard to have that isn't an amount mark, but it's a provision that says, we're sending out the code red,
Yeah.
we don't send out our crews, and now you know we're sending it out. You know, I don't know, I mean, it certainly addresses that point and shows that it is based on mobilization of the snowplow crew.
yeah, and I thought of that exact kind of verbiage today. I'm glad that Dan brought that up. You know, because I do think there should be some criteria in there that executes, you know, this ordinance being in effect, and if that means that plows are out, or there's verbiage to that effect, I think that's maybe a good starting point. We kind of see how that works this season.
I think that verbiage and then utilizing the code red definitely justifies the ordinance. I mean, look, we're not doing this to be punitive here. We're doing this because we need to get the streets clean, and we're also reaching out to try and give you a little warning to move. If you can't do it with the warning, and you're not going to move it when the plows need to get through, then you're putting us in a position where we have to move it for you. And I can stand by that. I can justify that. I can defend that all day.
Yeah. We have to replace like the signs, and we've got signs up in different parts of town, so I think it'll be better to at least have the plows, you know, when plows are present, or we'll come up with some wording for that, or Scott will, that we can put on the signs. But yeah, I think it's a good starting point. And the code red, I think, is a good way to help really get the word out. And of course, we'll publicize this through the city Facebook page, the police department Facebook page, cable access channel, the newsletter, etc. So I mean, we'll get the word out that way, and then through Code Red. And again, we always encourage people to sign up for Code Red through calls, texting, through the other means that emails that it uses to reach people. So.
Well, I like the idea of eliminating the 2 inches. I still like it of snow on any street or highway until all snow, ice, and similar debris has been plowed or removed from the paved portion of the street. It also states in there the chief police or his or her district may issue penalties. I think it should be directly up to the police department to use common sense. You know yourself right now who's going to abide by it and who's not. If somebody strange comes into town, they don't know about Code Red, and that I think it should be left up to the chief and his officers and the public and the street department.
We don't want to put anyone in a hardship, but we've all got to be on the same page. And I take owners for not being more consistent on this, I guess, because there is a lot of hit and miss. But I like this because it's consistent, we've addressed it. If people would spend half the time moving their vehicles as we've spent on this particular ordinance, we would be in compliance and it wouldn't be a problem.
And I would say this here, I think you will give them enough leeway in the very beginning, but I also think that it'll be you know, it can go out in the utility bills, it can be in the newspaper, it can be on so many different things. And if people do not get the message by then, the only message you're gonna get is in their pocketbook.
Yes, I'm fine. Any other questions? Richard, any questions?
Kind of.
Okay.
I think, just any, accumulation would be enough to, have people consider whether they're parking in a good spot. Any limitations or escape clauses, are going to be used, for exactly that purpose, as an escape clause. I didn't know that it was, that they had been sent out on the streets to plow. I didn't see the sign, you know, and it's certainly with the accumulation, well, geez, the wind was blowing and I only had a half an inch here, just on and on. Any excuses will do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully shoring this up some will eliminate some of that.
Pardon?
I'm hoping that shoring this policy up will eliminate some of that.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Any other questions? Okay,
I don't, anybody else have any questions on it, or?
thank you.
Yeah, just a comment, I guess, I agree completely with what Dan says about if the plows are out, move your car, because the private snow removal companies, like people that do driveways and sidewalks for people, it's basically a standing rule. If the plows are out, I'm gonna do your driveway. Okay, well, if the plows are out, move your car, otherwise it's gonna get towed, you know? Pretty straightforward.
Well, that still falls under, you know, removal. It eliminates the 2 inches out totally.
Yeah, take the inches out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
All right, thank you.
thank you.
So do we,
So all we're doing is reviewing this, right?
No, we're gonna make a motion on this. I'm gonna do
Oh, it
amendment.
doesn't say anything about that.
Says motion needed.
Have you got an ordinance number, section, in your packet? Richard?
Yes, I've got it right here in front of me. It says review draft amendment to ordinance section 1305 regarding motor parking regulations and penalties for parking violations.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it.
Well, I'll tell you, I'd like to act on it tonight, because otherwise, we have one policy for part of winter and another policy for the second part of winter, we might as well wait till next year.
Yes.
Yeah,
So, I don't see where there's, you know, a lot of controversy not to do it,
Yeah.
so I'd wanna get moving on it tonight.
I agree.
Mark, is there an ordinance number that we'll be using, or what?
Well, we'll assign an ordinance number to all of these if they're adopted, but you could just say revisions to ordinance 1305 and,
Amending it,
yeah, amending it, right, 1305.
okay?
Could I do one clarifying question, Mayor, quickly? Do you want the added language that I suggested after, and I think this goes to Dan's point, on the third line after the phrase street or highway that says it requires mobilization of any city snowplow crews? Do we need that in there or not?
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like it in there.
Yes.
Okay, and I will get that to you, Mark, but yeah, I would say if you're moving a motion to approve this ordinance, you would say with the revised language that was crafted during the meeting, you should be good to go.
Okay, well, we can move on that, I guess, then, so, somebody want to make the motion one way or the other?
I would move we amend the section 1305 with the revised language that we talked about tonight.
Okay, I'll second that one. Motion been made, amending section 1305 of the Kenyon Code regarding winter parking regulations, penalties for parking violations. Mayor Henke is a yes. Tom Guard? Councilman?
Yes.
Dan Ritchie?
Yes.
John Mortensen?
Yes.
And Richard Nielsen?
Yes.
Okay, yes is passed.
And then just to follow up on that, it just, we don't have, I don't think we have to act on it, but just directing staff to establish a code red notification, to work together to come up with something so we can get that, and then also to get the word out in the newsletter and Facebook and whatever else we can do, that this is in effect as of tonight, right? Goes into effect immediately.
Scott, this has to be published first before it goes?
Yes, it will be effective upon publication, so we get it in the next issue of the paper, and it will be ready and effective at that point in time.
Week from Wednesday.
Yep.
Of course, we'll probably have snow before then, but.
That's the same,
That's
2
staying
weeks,
solid, so.
2 weeks, we could make it for the rest of the year, actually, about.
Well, it'll be published,
Yeah.
probably the 16th, so I guess it'll be effective let's say the 16th of December.
Yeah. Okay.
So get it in. So Scott, if you can get this back to us tomorrow, possibly, or Thursday
Yeah, will do.
before noon?
Yeah, no, we'll do, we'll get it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Michelle, you take care of it, right? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go on then in legal, item C, which is a review of the draft amendment to ordinance section 520-09, residential fencing and screening. And Attorney Riggs, you on that again?
Yeah, my quick comments on this would be, this is a follow-up to discussions we had a couple of months ago. And this is language that Mark and I discussed briefly. It's the same, well, it's the same for the next ordinance as well. They both follow up from your previous discussion. They both, I believe, have been reviewed by Planning Commission. And the idea behind this language was to clear up, make it more simply, or more simple to review and enforce both. And that's what the language you have before you. So I stand for any questions and can explain if there's any issues you see with this.
Does anybody have any discussion on that?
Why do we care how tall someone's fence is?
What was that?
Why do we care how tall someone's fence is? I mean, is fencing around like if you want to fence your yard in?
Aesthetics. So there's two things that have been kind of a consistent, maybe not, well, complaint, but, you know, since I've been here with fences. I mean, it's not a constant thing, but it's come up, you know, multiple times. Number one is people have put 6-foot fences in the front half of their yard.
Okay.
Okay, and that's obviously an aesthetic issue. This doesn't really change that because the ordinance already says fences in the front half of the yard are 3.5, the maximum height is 3.5 feet, and then the rear half of the yard is 6 feet. But there's language in the ordinance that says within the buildable area of a house, fences up to 8 feet are allowed. And again, from an aesthetic standpoint, and this would be something adjacent to a house, you know, not so much on the property lines,
Okay.
that, you know, we've had complaints in the past, and there's not very many of them, but people have built these just gigantic fences and sides or rear, you know, more on the side of their house, and sometimes kind of pushing it up toward the front half more. So what the planning commission did was review that and then came up with proposed language, which then the city attorney amended, which you see here. And so basically it says that fences, the maximum height allowed across rear yards in the rear half, and this is where the language was tweaked to try to be more clear, is 6 feet, the maximum allowable height. And in the front half, in other words, fences extending across front yards and the front half of side yards cannot exceed 3.5 feet in height. So the height, the maximum heights are not a change in the ordinance, it's just worded, I think, more clearly of what the intention is.
I'm just wondering, like, if you have a 3.5 foot, I mean, my dog can jump that.
Yeah,
So, you know what I'm saying?
so
I
the
mean, my
way,
fence is in the back, it just is, you know, because that's where your house is, but
yeah,
what if somebody didn't have a house like that, and then they had a big white dog that jumped? I mean, that's
we've already had that, cases of that happen.
Okay,
So basically, the way this is worded, and I think the intention of the old ordinance was the same, is that if you take your lot and you cut it in half lengthwise for description purpose, and then you go along the side yard in the rear half of both side yards and then the rear property line,
Yeah,
that can be 6 feet.
okay,
So you can let your dog go in the rear half, which is what normal, a lot of times people do.
right,
And in the front yard, it can only be 3.5 feet tall, because that is kind of an aesthetic
okay,
issue. But you will see, I know there's a couple places where there are fences in front that are 6 feet tall.
right,
And a lot of other people, just don't think aesthetically, and I think a lot of cities don't allow that, so.
okay, I see.
Because
what you're saying.
aesthetically, it's not very, very attractive,
Right, okay.
so.
Mark, I'm not certain on that. Are the ones that are up, in violation now of the new ordinance, are they grandfathered in until it's replaced or something of that sort? Does that
Scott,
work?
can you answer that question?
Well, yeah, no, the issue really is, if something's in violation of the existing ordinance, which really was, it was difficult to interpret, but, the argument would be is if it's not in what we were thinking or deeming the buildable area from before, so if it extends all the way to the front of the right-of-way going in the front yard, it would have been inappropriate at that point in time. That's not being changed here. You'd still have the ability to enforce and say, no, you have to remove that fence. Now, I don't believe we've done that, unless Mark, I wasn't aware of it.
No.
But the reality is, yeah, it's not changing that. If they were in violation before, that's not the intent of what this ordinance is doing. It's trying to clarify it and make it more clear for people to understand. So, yeah, sure. Could you enforce it? Yes, you could. You could.
The 3.5 and the 6 foot language really is not any different. It's just, I think it's laid out more clearly. I think where you could theoretically run into an existing person that wouldn't be in compliance is if somebody's got like an 8-foot fence, say adjacent to their house. And my answer is gonna be no, I wouldn't go after them and make them tear that down. There's very few of them.
Yeah.
But if there was some, I guess I wouldn't recommend that we make them tear them down or cut them back. You could look at it on a case-by-case basis, but I think it might be a little dicey trying to enforce it if they go to court, but, so I don't think we're gonna run into much of an issue with that, though, because there's really not very many of them, if any.
Okay, we need a motion on that, what we're gonna do with it. Wanna make the motion, Tom?
A motion, I'm just not exactly sure how to word it. A motion, the ordinance amending section 520.09 of the Kenyon City Code regarding residential fencing and screening.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll second that one then. So a motion's been made and second for a review of draft amendment ordinance section 520-09 residential fencing and screening. And again, we will go with Mayor Henke as a yes, Tom Guard, Councilman. Dan Ritchie.
Aye.
John Mortensen.
Yes.
Richard Nielsen.
Aye.
Okay, ayes pass on the ordinance. Okay, the next one up on there is a review draft amendments to ordinance section 510.11 regarding flag lots. And Attorney Riggs, what can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This again is the discussion that you had, excuse me, a couple months ago. It's also gone through the Planning Commission review. The idea behind the language here is to, again, simplify and clarify, and in this case, I think it does clarify some, I don't want to say inconsistencies, but it was very difficult to point out and say what was really going on with this language. This was the original language. I think we discussed this at the previous council meeting. It was in your ordinance update. It was put together by a group of planners when we redid this section of the code. it may be worked in somebody's mind, but I think that suggested language makes it a lot easier for city staff to implement and to show to individuals who are affected by this type of ordinance. So again, I can explain anything further you want, but it really is a corrective, simplifying type ordinance to make the language better for city staff to enforce.
Is there any questions on what flag lots are? Flag lots are basically large, we'll say large lots for lack of a better description, that are not connected to a public street directly. In other words, the property doesn't front on a public right of way. They're only allowed according to Kenyon's zoning in the ag zone, and the ag zone generally is the area around the perimeter of the city. It's not the main residential areas. So it's a very kind of an obscure kind of lot that does not occur very often. But in the current ordinance, it was very ambiguous, and what this amendment does, which I think is badly needed, is that it gives a specific minimum size for lots that are flag lots, which is 2.5 acres, which is the minimum lot size of lots in the ag zone. Minimum setbacks, driveway stem widths, you can see when you read through that, would also be amended, but I think this is more realistic, and we ran into a flag lot situation with a conditional use application, which never was proceeded, they didn't proceed with it, but it showed us that we needed to really try to clarify this language, so this is something that we really need to clean up before we get another one of these. And they don't happen very often, but there are parcels of land in the city that aren't directly connected to streets that, we, in the ag zone, that we could run into this. So I think this makes it a lot more clear. And these kind of lots are still only allowed, as far as building homes go, as a conditional use permit. So the council still has, and the planning commission still has review authority over all of these, so it doesn't change any of that. It just makes it, I think, easier to clarify, to people, okay, this is what is required, this is the minimum lot size, the minimum driveway size, et cetera, driveway width.
Does anybody else have any questions on that? Then we can proceed ahead.
I'll move approval of the ordinance amending section 510 of the Kenyon City Code regarding the flag lots.
Okay, need a second on that?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and second on the amendment to the ordinance, section 5010-11 regarding flag lots. And again, we will go with Mayor Henke as an aye, Councilman Tom Garden,
Aye.
Dan Retchell,
Aye.
John Mortensen,
Aye.
Richard Nielsen.
Aye.
Okay. Ayes win on that regarding the flag lots, okay? And then also appeal of assessments for 930 Red Wing Avenue. And that also has a resolution in there, 2020-34 is tied with it. And again, Attorney Riggs, can you fill us in on that? Or is it you, Mark, or who's taking it on
Well,
that?
this is the one I jumped the agenda on earlier today, but, Derek mentioned that his staff memorandum as well covers explaining what's going on here. And maybe that may be the best way to explain it, but what you have before you is resolution 2020-34 and the accompanying development agreement, which is I don't want to say a fix, but a resolution to the objection you had at your public hearing for the assessments for Red Wing Avenue. Staff, which would be Mark and Derek, went out and had discussions with the property owner and did come to an agreement to remove a portion of the sewer and water main extension to a portion of the undeveloped lot, and that is now part of the development agreement. So in essence, what it really becomes is more or less a hookup or connection type charge under the development agreement. It's not part of the assessment that was certified with the assessment roll as of November 17th, but this is the resolution, this is the agreement. It requires that if the lot is developed or in any way, shape, or form subdivided, that payment would have to be made to the city at that point in time, or also any type of connection made to the water or sewer main that was extended. I don't know, maybe Derek, you can have further discussion, or Mark, about your discussions with the Marines on this?
Sure, yeah. So basically what we had discussed with them, you can see up on the screen is a map of the property. There's that 160 feet that's on the north end of the property that's currently undeveloped. So what we discussed with the Marines is an option for, say temporarily reducing the amount that they have to pay towards assessment for this project is to take the charge for the sanitary main and the water main in front of that 160-foot open field portion, and basically just remove it from the assessment, and that amount would be shifted over to this development agreement that Scott was just talking about. So after we kind of talked through some of those details with Marines, I don't want to speak for them, but they did give us a verbal that sounded good to them, and that $10,000 reduction for the purposes of this assessment, that they would be agreeable to that. So I know Scott has a lot more in the actual agreement itself in terms of the details of this actual agreement, but that's just kind of a quick summary of what was included.
So if you have any questions, please let me know. The development agreement is, as Derek said, basically details what's going on here. It's a fairly straightforward and simplistic agreement. Resolution simply approves that, and it also reaffirms that any assessments made are in effect from the previous resolution that was adopted for the assessment. So that was resolution 2020-30. Statement, yes, it is. And beyond that, no. Any questions you have, I would certainly try to explain them.
So if this ends up getting developed, it's basically a $10,000 hookup fee, correct?
Yes. That's correct.
From what I gather, did Matt come and speak to you again, Mark, on
Yes.
this issue?
Yeah, he said he was good with this proposal.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I didn't get to see him today, so I was wondering if there was any last minute. Is there any other questions from the council on this?
I'll move approval of resolution 2020-34.
Okay, we'll second that one then. So there's been a motion made and second for an appeal of assessments for 430, or 930, I should say, Redwood Avenue, resolution 2020-34. And again, we will go by vote. Mayor Henke is a yes. Councilman Guard? Aye. Dan Richardo?
Aye.
John Mortensen?
Aye.
And Richard Nielsen?
Aye.
Okay, ayes passed on the resolution 2020-34. Let's see, where are we at? I guess that's it in legal, is that correct? Is there anything
Yes.
else? If there isn't, we can go on to old business. Do you have anything else to say, Attorney Riggs?
Nope, that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then on to old business, which is resolution 2020-32, adopting the 2021 budget and establishing a tax levy for payable 2021. Mark, do you have something to say on that?
No, nothing additional. This is a, this is a 2.85% increase proposed for 2021. The final budget and levy resolution must be submitted to Goodhue County before the end of the year. So I don't know if there's any questions again. We had the hearing on December 1st. We had one party attend, but really didn't have any questions, so.
Okay, we need a motion on that one way or the other.
I move.
Okay, Richard, do we have a second on it? John?
I'll second.
Okay. The motion has been made and second on resolution 2020-32, adopting the 2021 budget and establishing a tax levy for payable 2021, and that's at 2.85%. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So we will go back again. Mayor Henke is an aye. Councilman Tungard.
Aye.
Dan Regigal.
Aye.
John Mortensen. Aye. Richard Nielsen.
Aye.
Okay, ayes pass on resolution 2020-32. Okay, the next one is approved. On the update on the former ambulance garage renovations, and I would say this here, Chief Lee, what do you have to say?
We are 98% moved in. We've got computers that work now, thanks to Mark and Eldridge Technologies and a lot of help. Signage is up, desks are in. We are really now just kind of like, I equate it to when you move into a new house and you're finishing unpacking, where the picture's gonna go, which drawers are gonna hold what. People have already been coming into the new office space, they really like it, they are very proud of it. Today we got the graphics and so forth are moved off the old building. The sign that was in front has now been moved to the side of the building. So really, you come from any way, you can see that that is our new police department, and we're real happy to have it. The staff are loving it, and they can't thank you all enough for letting us move forward with that project. So it's working out well. We've got a couple computer things to button up. We've got to get the security company back to finish the alarm and security camera stuff, but that's just some phone calls and then making some time. So it's working, we're working well. And if you sometimes stop in and take a look around, feel free. Once we're past the pandemic and we can start having some gatherings, we plan on having an open house and kind of showing off all the work that has gone into this. So it's gone really, really well. Any questions?
It's been a long time coming, but at least it's light at the end of the tunnel now.
And I gotta thank, Mr. Lawson did a lot of work on that too. He was instrumental in making phone calls and getting things lined up. We're doing phone over internet, which is something I've never worked with before. And he's made a lot of calls and got that going, and it's working out really, really well. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we can move on to new business, which is resolution 2020-33. Resolution committing capital fund balances.
So this, Mayor and Council, is just normal end of the year accounting action that just sets capital fund balances or commits capital fund balances. And the action is required as part of federal accounting standard GASB 54. And it's required before the end of the current year, contingent on audited final numbers. Therefore, the resolution included in the packet should be adopted by the council. The final year in capital fund amounts cannot be known until the 2020 audit is completed. So this is a kind of an annual thing that I think a lot of cities and counties do know. So.
Does this resolution cover all the approved transfers that are listed on here?
Yes, Exhibit A, yep.
So we go through all, through A through C all at once?
You just pass the resolution by itself, and that'll,
That takes care of all.
yeah.
A through which one?
C.
F or C?
Yeah, you just, when you adopt that resolution, by adopting, you adopt that whole list.
It'll go the whole way,
Yes.
all through G?
Yep. You don't have to list those out separate
Okay,
in the motion.
so resolution 2020-33 covers from A through G, is that correct?
Well, I don't, I don't think so.
No.
No, I think A, B, and C
A,
on
B,
the
and C.
agenda.
Okay,
Is it possible to get some approximation of what we're going to be transferring?
Well, we can,
Yes? No?
we can get back to you with the current balance or what's in those funds, but the problem is, we still have, expenditures that will come through, obviously in December and then into January, that were from, before year end, so I have to caution you that those numbers are subject to change, but, I can, if anybody wants, we can, it's probably best just to look at the budget or the current financials that are in the packet. That shows you the current balances in all funds. But other than that, it's really hard to say approximately, and I don't want to try to guess, estimate, because, things will come up at the end, may come up in the next few weeks. We hope not, but you never know. Expenses, unexpected expenses can come up, so it's difficult to really, to estimate them. That's why we don't put numbers in, because they can fluctuate.
We'd almost have to have a meeting on December 31st, and then tell everyone to make sure all your bills are in
Yeah,
by December 31st.
this is not feasible.
It just isn't gonna happen.
Because the bills can't all be in by the end of the year.
What's the legal ramifications of not approving this?
Well, we might be found not in compliance with our audit, which is kind of a big deal, because that affects, obviously, our audit. We get noted, we get cited in a management letter, but also even in things like the financing. When we get rated by Standard & Poor's, they look at, obviously the audit with a microscope, basically, so, we want as few notes and findings as we can avoid, so.
Yep. Yeah, this is pretty standard.
I also think that this would cover A through D, because that's, the Trondheim Road project is listed under one of the balance transfers.
Well, this is just committing the capital fund balances, this resolution. You are then gonna have two separate actions below that for the fire department year-end remaining funds and the street maintenance year-end remaining funds. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the whole gist of that last
Oh,
question.
okay.
So basically, 2033 commits the capital fund balances. When we talk about transferring the year-end funds, the two that the city normally transfers are the fire department and the street department, year-end balances. Otherwise, the remainder of the balances in the other funds, just through an accrual accounting process, just go into cash or reserve balance, however you describe that. So this resolution is just really a kind of a boilerplate thing that talks about the overall, the capital fund balances that we have. And it's, you can say it's part of the audit. And so by passing this resolution, when the audit's conducted, they know that all those capital fund balances then are committed. And, it's just kind of a continual thing every year. So that's different than, I think, what you were listing on. I apologize, I didn't catch what you were referring to there. So the fire department, the street department will be separate motions, and then you'll have this project fund balance transfer, which is another, I'll get into that here in a couple minutes.
okay.
That's a whole nother action that we're asking the council to take, but that's not part of this 2020-33.
I'll get the ball rolling by moving resolution number 2020-33.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and second for resolution 2020-33. Again, Mayor Henke is an aye, Councilman Telfair,
Aye.
Dan Rettigal,
Aye.
John Mortensen,
Aye.
Richard Nielsen.
Yay.
Okay, ayes passed on resolution 2020-33. Okay, then we have to do each one. The fire department has another one that we have
Yeah,
to go
so
through.
this is
Okay.
approved transfer of the year-end remaining funds of the fire department to capital.
Okay.
And again, this is an annual action that the council has done at least the last probably 5 years, if not longer. And
So that
again,
last resolution included D as in dog?
no, I did not.
Just
No.
a,
Just
All
a,
right,
Just a,
just A, okay.
and again, the actual amount of what's left in that fire department fund won't be available until it's audited. So it's the same principle as we just talked about with the last resolution.
I move we approve the transfer of the fire department year-end remaining funds to capital fund.
We'll second that one. So a motion been made and second for the transfer, approval of the transfer of fire department year-end remaining funds to capital fund. Mayor Henke is an aye. Councilman Tom Guard.
Aye.
Dan Retchigo.
I,
John Mortensen.
Aye.
And Richard Nielsen.
Nay.
Okay. Ayes pass. And move on to the next one, which will be the same thing, approval of transfer of street maintenance year-end remaining funds to capital fund. Is there any discussion on that? No discussion of any
I'll
sort?
move approval to transfer the street maintenance here in
Okay.
remaining funds to the
I'll
capital.
second that.
Okay, a motion's been made and second for approval. Transfer of street maintenance year-end remaining funds to capital funds. Again, I'll go Mayor Henke is an aye. Councilman Tom Guard.
Aye.
Dan Retchigo.
I,
John Mortensen.
Aye.
Richard Nielsen.
Nay.
Okay, ayes pass. There's two of them. Okay, move along. Now this is a different one here again.
Okay, so this is kind of a one-time, I would call this accounting adjustment. The council is being requested to approve 2 interfund transfers. And we tried to lay these things out as best we could here. Basically, there's funds remaining in what is Fund 409, which was from the Trunnion Road Extension Project. And there's a breakdown in your packet of this. The final payment, or based on, the final payment from that fund, that came out of that fund, was made in 2016. So the city, that fund has carried a balance of $100,221.96. What we're proposing is some 2 transfers from 409 to some other funds that are showing a negative balance. Again, this is an action that was basically that the auditors have asked the city to take, or the council to approve. First of all, transfer from Fund 409 to Funds 430 and 208. In order to close that fund out, the auditors have recommended that the balance be transferred into 2 other project funds that currently show a negative balance. Specifically, the $59,787 be transferred from 409 into Fund 208, which was the fire hall project fund. And that $40,435 be transferred again from Fund 409 to 430, which is the First Street Reconstruction Project Fund. And then secondly, that the transfer of funds from Enterprise Fund share of Fund 430 to eliminate the remaining balance in Fund 430, which is the First Street Reconstruction Project Fund. The auditors have recommended the transfer of $1,492 from Fund 601, which is the Water Enterprise Fund. And then that a transfer of $15,660 from Fund 602, which is the Sanitary Sewer Enterprise Fund. And finally, transfer of $2,089 from Fund 605, which is the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, into Fund 430, which again is First Street Reconstruction. This would be a total transfer of $19,241 into Fund 430. So these transfers require council approval, and as I said, there's a summary in your packet with more information.
so just so I understand this, so the Trondheim Road Loan Fund, when that was all done, that project, that ended up with $100,000 more than.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at the transaction, you know, the ins and outs of that thing, you know, to tell you exactly. I don't know if we, didn't have, you know, as many expenses when that project was done. It may have something to do with how the assessments came in. There's probably a dozen different reasons that could have contributed to that.
But then the fire hall and the first street, then at the end of the day, we ended up coming up short in those. And so it's,
A little bit, yep.
yeah, so
It's very common with these enterprise construction funds that you, especially over a period of time, you may run, I mean, and again, this goes usually to when they're paid off, because there's always gonna be fluctuation, like with the Red Wing project, you know, at the beginning, we're gonna have a lot of cash coming in because people are paying their assessments off. So basically, sometimes with these projects, and you, like the Kenyon project, to put that in perspective, was over, I think that whole project was over like $2.5–3 million. So to have 100,000 one way or another is not, you know, uncommon, especially after 30 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And a lot of times these things will be on the books. They may be on the books with negative balances for a long time, because we don't just write a check out necessarily to, you know, pay that off. But because the Kenyon Fund had that much of a balance in it, the auditors like to kind of see cities use that toward other, you know, project, you know, so we kind of look at it as an inter-fund
yeah.
transfer.
We're not really, at the end of the day, we're not changing the bottom line here.
No.
We got the benefit to the Trondheim Fund, but then we took the loss to the fire hall and First Street. Now we're just swapping it out.
Well, luckily, we have that money to do that, and we don't always have that.
Yep.
So that's why what we're saying is this would be a good time now to give it, to make that transfer what we can, and get those kind of all, so they're all zeroed out.
Does that then close out those funds then? Like we didn't wipe them off the books?
Yes, eventually it will. It may be another couple of years, but there will be a period of time when there's no transactions in fact that, yeah, they'll basically just, be kind of zeroed out, so.
Actually making some use of that on paper.
Yep, that's what a lot of this is.
Yeah.
When you have a negative project balance, you know, the auditors don't tell you, okay, you have to pay $30,000 out of the general fund to pay this off.
Right, you'd be writing a check to the city.
Yep, they don't do that. So basically, it's kind of like a shell thing almost, you know. I don't want to say that in negative, but I mean, it's not really a game, but it's, yeah,
Sure it is.
sure. So anyway.
Makes sense.
At the end of the day, we're stuck with the bag, and the bag might be half full or.
Could have a hole in the bottom of it.
Well, sometime the piper's calling, so
Right.
maybe you
Yeah,
can
we
say
got the
that's
first
no.
string through the hole.
Yeah. Well, this one, I was confused on this coming into the meeting tonight.
Yeah.
You explained it very well, and it makes perfect sense. So I'll move approval of the Fund 409, this thing, this piece of paper. The balance transfer from Fund 409.
Okay. Somebody second that?
I'll second.
You did? Okay. Motion has been made and second on Fund 409 for the Trondheim Extension Project remaining balance transfer. Again, we'll go with Mayor Henke as an aye, Councilman Tom Guard,
Aye.
Dan Regigal,
Aye.
John Mortensen. Aye. Richard Nielsen.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, move that one out of the way. Okay, Kenyon Police Department, use of force policy revision. Chief, are you ready for explaining that one?
As we all know, there's been a lot of talk and ideas going around about some changes to helping law enforcement that are all over the place. A lot of this is kind of stuff that we've been doing in our small towns for years and years and years. So this is kind of business as usual for us. Some of the changes are, and again, we've always kind of done this way, if I'm involved, because we are a small agency, so I patrol the streets and take calls for service. Larger agencies, I don't think their admin is out in a uniform taking calls for service like we do here. So basically, I consider myself a patrolman, just like Randy's working this evening. So if I have some sort of use of force incident, I would probably look elsewhere to have that reviewed. As far as for the things like chokeholds and so forth that they talk about, we haven't had that in our policies in the past, so we don't do any of that stuff. But the post board, which is our governing body, said, these are some of the changes that we want to see, and if you don't follow these changes across the board, if there's federal funds available and you want to apply for that, you can't do that. So an example of that would be when they do, sometimes they'll give some fundings to add a police officer under a federal grant. And if we didn't have these changes in place or this policy in place, we couldn't apply for those kind of funds. So we're kind of just getting in line with everyone else, and we need to bring this to you that review and okay.
So that in other words, hiring their part-time deputies for here, they're already following this compliance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is all standard procedure for us, really. There's a couple tweaks here and there, but when they talk about the de-escalation and stuff, we do that all the time. And the nice thing about being in a small town is we kind of know everybody. So if I have a situation and I get a call and I show up and go, well, I know this person, I've known them for years and they know me. We transport a lot of people. They talk about de-escalation. We'll transport a lot of people to the hospital in the front seat, not even handcuffed with us because they're having a tough time. And so we do a lot of these things already. But the post board said this is what we want in writing like this, and so we are being in compliance.
Okay. Any of the councilmen have something to ask? Chief, you got something more to say?
Nope, that's it. I'm up here in case you have any questions.
Okay. Well, then we can move on with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Need a motion on that? I will make the motion on it for the Kenyon Police Department use of force policy revision.
Second?
Have a second on it? Okay. There has been a motion made and second for the Kenyon Police Department use of force policy revision. And we will again go. Mayor Henke is a yes. Councilman Tongard?
Yes.
Dan Rechigo?
Aye.
John Mortensen?
Aye.
Richard Nielsen?
Aye.
Okay. Ayes pass on the use of force policy revision. Okay, the next one we can go is 2021 tobacco license renewals, and that's for Kenyon Market, River County Co-op Speedway, which I gather is going to be changed here after the first of the year, I believe, and the Kenyon Municipal Liquor Store. We need a motion on that.
So move.
I'll second it then. Motion been made and second for 2021 tobacco license renewal for Kenyon Market, River County Co-op, which is Speedway, and Kenyon Municipal Liquor Store. Again, we will go with Mayor Henke as an aye, Councilman Tongard,
Aye.
Dan Rechigo,
Aye.
John Mortensen.
Aye.
Richard Nielsen,
A comment
yes.
in that I don't think the city should be in the market for selling tobacco. But other than that, I will say aye.
Okay, thank you, Richard. On that one, 2021 tobacco license renewals has passed. Okay. Discuss adoption of Administrative Policy 32, covering city council issued iPads.
So, as everybody's aware, we purchased iPads for what I hope will be the January meeting so that basically the city can go paperless. One of the things that I've been pulling my hair out is probably a good way to put it, except I don't have much to pull out. I've been trying to install this MDM system on these iPads, which is a multiple device management system. This is just a side note, but, and I've been working with Apple government, with CDW where we bought the iPads, and trying to come up with, to install a software operating system platform on these iPads that basically allows central control of them in effect, so that, you know, software can be downloaded on all of them, so that, you know, we can manage them. You know, I can manage, so the city administrator basically can manage them. It doesn't mean that you as council people can't operate them and do certain things, but it just allows centralized control of these units. And it's been interesting trying to do that. But one of the things that I came up, one of the ideas I had and did some research on was having a policy that covers the issued iPads. And so what you have is this policy that is a draft. I didn't find a lot of these policies, and this is, Scott, you and I didn't get a chance to discuss this. I don't know how common this type of policy is with some of your larger cities, I think, that would have these. That, you know, if they have policies like this, or if they have policies at all, but I do think we need something that kind of covers the use of these iPads.
Yeah, no, I agree. It makes sense, and in particular, the very last paragraph of the policy is what's the main thing that the council should be aware of. But no, there are larger communities that have this type of policy, so it is very helpful to have this, and Mark, you're correct, you should have some.
Okay. So what my intention with this is tonight is to distribute it, discuss it for information, then we'll have it on the agenda again for the January meeting. That will give Scott a chance to review it, and then you Mary and Molly, you guys a chance to review it. And we'll then come back at the January meeting. If there's any changes, we can make them. But I think I tried to keep this as straightforward as I could without completely, you know, losing the main parts of a policy and why you have one. So obviously this, I think, is, you know, can be revised if need be. I think it covers, you know, some cities, counties have policies that are 10 pages long, and obviously we're not going to go there. But I tried to get a policy that covered enough things that, you know, are pretty much a given. I think most of these things are, yet had enough detail that I think gives us, you know, good oversight. So that's what it amounts to.
Are we going to use our same email address, or will we have new ones?
You're gonna have
strictly for the city?
Yeah, you're gonna have a city assigned on these devices. There's gonna be a City of Kenyon. My intention is there'll be a City of Kenyon email address. So it'll be your name, your first initial, and your last name at cityofkenyon.com. Now, one thing I'll need to get from all of you, maybe you can just email this to me, but is a password for that, because we can set up the emails here. You know, as the administrator could do that. So my intention is to set up emails for the council people starting in January, and for the council members. So I'll need to get from all of you like a password for that. And then, right, that would be, you know, we can kind of do it either way, but I mean, as far as your communications go, then what I'd like to do is be able to just direct everything when we email to that city email.
Okay, so we create a password then?
Yes, I'll need you to
Okay.
create a password, that is correct.
Is any of that going to go onto our own personal email?
Well, right now, everybody
Like you do
gets, you know, we tried the City of Kenyon email setup probably in about 14, and it did go it wasn't real widely accepted. A couple of the council members at that time used it, but about 3 of them didn't really use it, so we ended up going just back to everybody's own email or whatever they gave us. So with this, though, I think because these are city-owned iPads, I don't really think we have much of a choice from a, you know, application standpoint, but to use city emails on them. I don't think, you know, people go online on these things, and I've read this in other cities, and they've got like a Gmail account, and they use it and they check the personal email, I mean, that's